Hello there everyone, and welcome back to Void Dwarf Studios for part 4 of our Space Marine series, and honestly one of my favourite parts. We are going to look at Dreadnaughts. Dreadnaughts. I mean, look at it! Is it not just beautiful?
The Dreadnought is one of the oldest pieces of machinery the Imperium possess. There are old records of Dreadnoughts being used in the Unification Wars, when the Emperor was trying to unite all of mankind. Unite via violence and a little bit of diplomacy, but mostly violence. But these old proto-Dreadnought suits could be used for non-Space Marines, although after this point Dreadnoughts were exclusively used for Space Marines.
Possibly one of my favourite units in all of Warhammer 40k, purely because it is a massive suit of armour with big guns, big close combat weapons, with a hero inside who's decided for one reason or another he's too awesome or too stubborn to die. And luckily for him, his chapter agrees and decide to place him inside the Dreadnought sarcophagus so he can continue kicking ass in the name of the Imperium until the end of time. Some Dreadnoughts are thousands of years old, one of the oldest being Bjorn the Fell-Handed, who was still alive when the Primarchs wandered around. But it isn't all sunshine and roses being inside a Dreadnought sarcophagus. There are some unfortunate things that have to happen to you first. First off, you don't just get a Dreadnought body if you're fully healthy. If you are in a Dreadnought, it is because you are unable to survive outside of life support machinery. I've got this lovely little image here of a standard Dreadnought chassis from the 41st millennium to give you a rough idea of what happens to you when you're inside of a Dreadnought.
The unfortunate, or fortunate, depending on how you think about it, Marine inside is interfaced with what is called a Mind Impulse unit, which allows the Dreadnought to move with a surprising amount of balance, speed and coordination. They're not exactly going to accelerate all that fast, but their top speed once they start running is quite impressive, especially for something that looks so bulky and, well, ungainly. The armour is made out of ceramite and adamantium, and the muscles that allow the arms and legs to move are electrofibre bundles and magna coils, basically representing the muscles and ligaments of the human body. The sarcophagus itself is also extremely tough, allowing it to survive really heavy impacts from heavy weaponry, and making it easier if the Dreadnought body does get damaged or destroyed to recover the Marine inside. All Dreadnoughts contain speakers which allow the warrior to speak to Space Marine on the outside, and it comes out as this synthesized metallic crackling noise, which tends to mean that the Dreadnought has a great big booming electric voice, which is kind of badass, I'm not gonna lie.
You are basically plugged into this suit, and you will never leave it. Let's make no mistake though, this is a pretty lonely existence. You will be inside your sarcophagus in your specialized tank, your limbs have basically all been removed. The only thing left is your torso, your head. Every form of stimuli is connected via cables and wires to the sarcophagus. You are effectively trapped. Your service to the Imperium has not ended. You will carry on fighting this way until the day you die. And the Dreadnought sarcophagus technology allows Dreadnoughts to potentially live thousands of years, so long as they are well maintained and given plenty of time to rest. Because the longer these Dreadnoughts are in active service, the harder they find to bear their surroundings. And on top of all that, you can be asleep for hundreds of years at a time. You can go to sleep knowing the names of all the tech marines that are looking after you, and wake up and completely different bunch of faces are looking after you, and you've been told that 1,000 years has gone by, and you're now awake because they need you to go fight some horrible beastie. I would be really cranky if I was a Dreadnought. And a lot of them are. A lot of them are a bit on the cranky side. And a lot of them do wish for death.
It is only because the Space Marine inside has a noble and strong spirit that the Space Marine doesn't go crazy from the loneliness and from the constant lack of stimulation.
In order to keep the pain and to keep the discomfort to a bare minimum, you're awoken from deep medically induced comas for short periods at a time. Typically speaking, you're woken to take part in a battle, or if someone particularly wants a piece of advice from you. The Tech Marines will look after you in the armory, They will do their best to keep you sedated and asleep for as long as comfortably possible, only awaking you in dire circumstances. And a Dreadnought is a fantastic multiplier by itself. Heavy armor that can only be really affected by truly heavy weapons. These things are titans on the battlefield. Not actual titans, we'll get to them in another video, but they are very powerful creations of themselves. We don't really know who came up with the Dreadnought body.
However, it is the Mechanicum's responsibility for looking after the current Dreadnought,
as they are responsible for most of the Imperium's technological advances and maintaining of their technology. All chapters have Space Marines who are taken to the Forge World on Mars to be trained, where they will learn the abilities to repair, maintain and look after the various weapons and vehicles of their chapter, and they will gain an insight on the machine spirit. In this way, they are able to help the Dreadnoughts stay in comatose states until they are required for battle. In the Horus Heresy, there was a more sophisticated suit, known as the Contemptor pattern. This, I personally feel, a far more artistically pleasing suit, is one of the oldest still around. If a chapter has a Contemptor Dreadnought warsuit, then they are one lucky chapter, because Contemptors are really, really, really rare, and the ability to maintain them is getting more and more complicated. But these are fantastically sophisticated weapons of war, easily capable of being mounted with some of the heaviest guns, and with heavy armour that makes modern Dreadnoughts feel a little jealous.
Add to that, because of their more upright bipedal nature, they tend to be much faster, swifter, and even, dare I say, agile compared to the standard Dreadnought of the 41st millennium. And with the additional advantage of more sophisticated scanning technology, they are far more capable of tracking targets that would try to get the jump on them.
There are various different patterns depending upon the chapter, and depending upon what function you wish your Dreadnought to fulfill. A Dreadnought can, effectively, just be a walking firing platform. Give it big guns and it'll just walk around shooting things. But it can also be a fantastic close combatant, giving it power fists, various types of power claws, allowing it to really rend and tear. And smaller arms, such as heavy flamers or bolters, allow it to deal with infantry really easily. My favourite Dreadnought is my Contemptors, because they are fantastic at, well, everything. They're heavily armoured, they have a specialised shield generator that allows them to absorb impact from larger weapons, meaning that they can take far more punishment than the standard Dreadnought of today, and they are able to punch, shoot and drag anything out of the way that decides to try and stop it. Truthfully, the only thing that can bring these things down is heavy firepower, or massed, really tough, high-impact, close combat weapons. And even then, it's going to take a little while.
The other two patterns that saw a lot of use during the time of the Horus Heresy are the Dreadio and the Leviathan Dreadnought. The Dreadio being famous for its ludicrous amount of firepower that you can stack, basically being a walking gun platform and truly taking that meaning to heart, as well as being very gifted at shooting things out of the sky with its quad autocannons, and the Leviathan being the ultimate key to the city, aka if anyone tries to lock the key in the door to the city, the Leviathan won't just break down the door, it'll break down the frame holding the door and the wall that was attached around the door. I love Leviathan Dreadnoughts. They are by far the biggest variant of Dreadnought that exist, and only a handful of them still exist in the 41st millennium. These beasts, more often than not, are equipped with specialised siege drills, power fists, power claws, but they do have access to quite a wide array of heavy weapons.
As we get into the modern 40k, the standard Dreadnought sarcophagus template is much more simplistic and brutish. This template was around in the Horus Heresy, but not widely used, primarily because the Contemptor was just superior.
This was known as the Castafarian pattern.
These Dreadnought suits were created more of a backup, more of a desperate need for extra warsuits. But they built so many of them, and they were so quick to produce, that there are still plenty hanging around, and the pattern is still very well known in all Mechanicus worlds. Much like their older, more venerable Contemptor counterparts, these Dreadnoughts are equally capable of being equipped with some of the heaviest weapons the Imperium can handle. Las cannons, multi-melters, plasma cannons, and often given secondary weapons such as power fists, power claws, and in the case of certain chapters, they can even have close combat weapons like frost axes and swords. or hammers, each variation on this being for a specific purpose. So for example, if you are an ironclad dreadnought, then you are equipped usually with, well, Leviathan level weaponry. Basically, you're equipped with siege drills, power fists, wall busting, and door breaking down tools. If you're a Furioso dreadnought, then you tend to be equipped with lots of flamethrowers and power claws for killing lots of little things. If you're a Mortis dreadnought, then you're equipped with heavy guns, missiles, and you act a bit like a firing platform. And if you're a Venerable dreadnought, then you're a hero who has managed to survive for thousands of years, who more often than not can even lead armies into battle. There are many chapters who will take the leadership of a dreadnought because of their thousands of years of combat experience. And then there are lots of other subtypes, all based on this pattern. You have a chaplain variant, you have one which is for psychers in the Blood Angels, basically a close combat killing machine with psychic powers, because awesome. And the Space Wolves go a step further by giving their dreadnoughts actual weapons, axes, swords, shields, basically equipping them with what they would prefer to use in life. There are so many variations and so many different ways to use this pattern that they are almost as useful as the Contemptor. They're just missing that wonderful shield that makes the Contemptor so awesome. Now in terms of how to utilize a dreadnought, it's relatively straightforward. You can either land them on the ground with via a landing craft earlier on in the engagement, or you can chuck these beautiful things inside of a drop pod and throw them directly into the enemy ranks. As the doors bust open, revealing this monstrous murder suit of death, the enemy, quite rightly, poops their pants. Because, frankly, Space Marines are bad enough. Having a dreadnought wandering around your backlines is absolutely horrendous. It is the last thing you want. Or, if you want to be lazy, you can always stick them in a Storm Raven and drop them off that way. They're not inside the Storm Raven, I want to make this clear. They're held on via various cables attached to the underside. So they're sort of just dangling there until the Storm Raven does a pass, detaches, and it drops to the ground. At relatively low altitudes, I want to add. These things are pretty tough, but I wouldn't want to drop it from low orbit. Now we start to look into the more modern dreadnought, the Redemptor pattern dreadnought. This is an interesting upgrade of sorts to the dreadnought. A more powerful warsuit, no doubts about it there, but it comes with a cost, in that the occupant inside will almost always die from exhaustion if used too regularly. The exact description used in the codex is that the occupant is burnt out, as in their body is literally burnt to a crisp from overusing the systems. A more powerful dreadnought, yes, but at the cost that if you push the pilot too far, well, you lose a hero who can never be replaced, which I feel is a little bit of a stupid trade-off in my personal opinion, but that is what's currently been designed for the Primaris Marines. Armed and armoured with some of the latest and best technology that the Mechanicum can dish out, these things are pretty damn handy and almost always very tough to take down. No special shielding like the Contemptor, but it is far broader and tougher than the Castafarian pattern. And the latest variant is, well, it's a scout dreadnought, okay? It's called an Invictor warsuit. Yeah, as you can tell, I don't have a lot of respect for this thing. I kind of hesitate to include it in here. I only do it because it is, well, it's basically a Redemptor pattern dreadnought without the sarcophagus. The Marine inside is very much alive and, very much not in need of medical treatment. It's basically a scout dreadnought from the Avatar movie, with all the blue people in. I suppose you could also compare it to those walking machines in the Matrix, but effectively it is a scout dreadnought with an open canopy and the ability to attach heavy guns to it. Oh yeah, and you can basically have what is a heavy bolt pistol. Yeah, I'm really not a fan of this thing. I feel like it's a bit pointless. At last I checked, scouting and being sneaky doesn't mean being big, tall, lumbering and heavy. Yes, the Imperial Guard do have their Scout Sentinels, a much smaller, lighter version, but those things are
comparatively speaking, way quieter. And frankly, when you are a squishy human wandering through the jungle or the desert or wherever, you want that protection in the form of a scout sentinel. But this thing? It's huge! The scout sentinel's maybe half the size, if that. It just, especially for Space Marines, when they have so many options for scouting, this seems like the worst one. This is like, I don't know.
That's not really, that doesn't really work for me. So, despite the final example I've given, which I'm still hesitant whether I should place this here, because technically the occupant is still alive, so does that really make it a dreadnought? It's basically a warsuit with a living occupant inside. It's a mech, you know? Dreadnoughts are different. The tragedy of a dreadnought is that the person inside, this heroic, noble individual, is forever bound to their fate. There's an old saying amongst the Space Marines, "Even in death I still serve." That's very much the motto of a dreadnought. They are very much treated as though they have died. The people inside are treated as though they have, they've passed on, they've become something new. No one ever gets to see their face except maybe the occasional tech marine, and there's not much of it left once you've plugged all those cables and wires into it. But I think dreadnoughts are one of my favourite vehicles in the Space Marine armoury just because they have so much potential for character. You have Bjorn the Fell-Handed, trapped in that dreadnought body for thousands of years, who could remember walking the stars with his Primarch Gleeman Russ. You have Liberian dreadnoughts who have all this psychic power and might, but stuck inside of a warsuit. They may be far more powerful than a Space Marine ever could be, but they'll never get to feel the air on their skin. They'll never get to feel the sunlight. They'll never get to see with their own eyes the world ever again. And it's that sacrifice for the Imperium that is both noble and tragic in my eyes. But anyway, on a more uplifting note, dreadnoughts are awesome. They cause all kinds of carnage, they come in all shapes and sizes, and each and every one of them has a fantastic use, task, and for the most part makes sense. I hope you all enjoyed this video. Please like and subscribe, let me know how I'm doing. I'm tweaking the audio as best as I can, and I know it's funny in places, but I think it's partly because of my location, partly because of my microphone. I'm still learning, I'm still figuring it out. But please, 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 leave your comments, tell me if it's gotten any better. And yeah, thank you all very much for your support. Take care everyone.